Okay, so we're gonna get this ready to send the substance. So if I turn off my wireframe unshaded, you can see that the model has some hard edges right here on areas that aren't supposed to be hard. So I'm gonna just get rid of those by using average normals. So let me go back into my standard modeling view. Now the feather actually looks pretty good because we did that already, but let's go and fix the inkwell. So if I select just the, just that mesh by going into face mode and double clicking one of the faces, I can go to mesh display and let me actually tear this menu off. Now if I do soften edge and deselect it, this is what it looks like. Now if I did undo, by the way. If I do harden edge, this is what it's going to look like. So all the edges are going to be hardened. So some of these I want to be hardened and some of them I want to leave as is. So for instance, this one, I actually want this edge loop here to be hardened, but I want to keep the ones here a little softer. So I'm going to select one of those and then shift double click to select the entire ring of edges. And then I'm going to go to soften edge. What that's going to do is it's going to give it a nice like soft look, but keeping that like hard edge right there. So I need to do the same thing for this upper loop. So select one of the edges and hold down shift and then double click the next edge and then do soften edge. And then if you go back out into object mode, you can see that it looks a lot softer. Gonna do the same thing with this ring and this ring. So now those all look nice and smooth without actually, adding any polygons to the model. Same thing with this one and this one and this one. Soften edge. Okay, so that actually looks pretty good. I think I might need to harden one of the edges on this piece here. So I'm gonna select that edge and do harden edge. Looks a lot more crisp. I guess I'll do it for these two while I'm here. And same thing here, except these edges are a little different in the ones we need to select. So I'm going to select these individually. So I selected that edge loop there, and I'm just going through and adding these edges here to the selection. Okay, that actually looks pretty close to what I was hoping for. I'll go ahead and save that. So in Substance, you're going to want to have a low poly and a high poly. Now the high poly can come from ZBrush, or it can come from Maya. So on props, I'll generally, if I'm making something in Maya, I'll just make the high in Maya after making the low. Now if I'm working in ZBrush, I'll make the high in ZBrush, and then I'll do something called retopology and make the low within Maya or ZBrush, depending on what I'm working on. So this is one method of creating a high poly that you can use to bake maps with. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to name this one low. I'm going to duplicate it and name that one high. And I'm going to hide the original. Now the high, it doesn't matter if you have UVs on the high. the UVs aren't going to matter on the high poly, just on the low poly. Okay, so if I hit 3 on my keyboard, you can see the smooth preview. And this is what it's going to look like whenever you hit that smooth option in Mesh. So if you go here and hit smooth, this is what your model is going to look like. I'm going to go back to 1. So if I were to just smooth it like that, this is basically what the preview showed me, which is not exactly what I want. So I want to do a few things before smoothing it. So I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm going to turn the smooth preview on, and what I'm going to do is crease some edges to retain their actual shape. So let's go into edge mode and toggle back between high and low, or smooth, preview, and regular. So I'm going to select that edge right there. I'm going to go into 3, and I'm going to go to Mesh Tools and use the Crease tool. Now, Crease tool is kind of weird. You have to use your middle mouse button, and you click and drag to the right to crease it fully, or to the left to remove the crease. So I'm going to drag it all the way to the right because I want it fully creased. I'm going to get the edge in the inside there too, make that a little harder. Same thing for this one. And sometimes it's hard to see, so you can just toggle between the regular smooth, or the regular view, and the smooth preview. Sometimes it's easy to know which ones that you need to crease though. Okay, now for this one, it's going to be a little weird. It's going to be, let's actually crease that edge right there, see what that looks like. And I'm going to crease, let's see what it looks like if you just do this one. Okay, so that doesn't look bad, but I think I might want to put creases on the edge loops here. And again, sometimes you don't know which ones to use until you actually see them creased. Okay, doesn't look too bad. Let's see what it looks like with this set creased as well. Okay, that's actually, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to continue creasing using the edge loops on the rest of the model. And the feather, it's a little hard to know which ones to crease on the actual feather. Might want to keep the inner edges. So let's isolate select this one. I'm gonna just hit F to frame it or focus in on it. Okay, so let's select that edge and shift double click that edge right there, and it'll select what's inside of those two edges. And I'm gonna do the same thing with that one. And then if I go back to 3, and then I harden that edge there, or excuse me, crease it. Go back out. And let's see what we can do on this one. Oops, make sure you get back into the crease tool. You know what, I think I'm going to do it like that. Maybe just select the entire edge loop there. So I'm going to do it by selecting the faces. So if I click on one of the faces and then shift double click, it'll select that entire edge loop, so you can see. And go to, let's see, you do control right click, you can go to edges, and then it'll select those edge loops there. And then you can do the crease tool and crease those. Got something weird happening right there, so I might need to go in and fix that. Yeah, it looks like I've that selected the vertical edges as well, so maybe not the best way to select it. So just go ahead and just double click on one of the edges and shift double click on the next one, and then Y to repeat that same tool. And we'll do that for all of these. Now on some of these you may want to come in here and get one of those edges right there that kind of go up the spine, just so it actually gets a little closer to where it's supposed to be. And that way it looks like they're a little more joined instead of floating outside of the spine. All right, so looks like we've got our model creased and ready to be smoothed. Okay, so for the bottom, there's a little bit of darkening happening on the model here. It looks like I've missed a crease, so let's fix that real quick. But whenever you're having like some shading issues, like based on the normals, you probably just want to add an extra edge loop there and it'll fix it. Yeah, so if you want to come in and add a few extra edge loops to this high poly, it's not going to matter. It'll make it look a lot more crisp and clean. And what we're about to do is smooth it, so I'm just kind of looking around the model to make sure I've not missed any creases. Long edge there. Okay, I think that's about it for the creases. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and smooth it. I'm gonna go into mesh and let's check out the options real quick. Now you can change the division level to something higher if you want to smooth it more than just the once. Let's see what it looks like with just the default settings. And I'm gonna hit 1 on my keyboard so that it'll go back to the normal hardness. I hit apply. Actually looks really close to what the smooth preview did. So if I were to change that division level to something higher and hit apply, it's going to give me a lot harder, or a lot more edge loops there. And if that looks good to you, then we can go ahead and send it to Substance. Go ahead and save that. So now we have our, let me unhide that low poly. So we got the low poly and we've got the high poly. And if I open up the channel box, you'll see I've got some history on this model along with some translation, which is odd because I don't remember translating that. So let's put that back at 0. So I might have accidentally moved it, so it's good that we looked at that. All right, so edit, delete by type, history. This isn't super necessary for Substance, but I just like to have clean files. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And I'm going to export my high and export my low. But before I do that, I want to set up some materials. So I'm going to do an isolate select on that, and I'm going to go into my hypershade. When you open up your hypershade, now you can get to it here from this button, or you can go to Windows and then Rendering Editors and Hypershade. It's there as well. This is going to be your materials. And this is going to be where the material network is. These are a few materials that you can choose from, although to be 100% honest, I've only used maybe 10% of these throughout my time using Maya. The ones under the Maya tab are the more widely used ones, but Arnold has actually put in a few of their own. Now, if you're going to be rendering in Arnold, you're going to want to set some Arnold shaders up, but all I'm doing right now is isolating meshes to materials so that it works a little better in Substance. So I'm just going to create some blends for different areas. So let's see, let's go ahead and rename that blend. So you can double click on it and it's going to open up some attributes here over in the right side, or it has some of those attributes here as well. So let's just name it. Now, if you're working in Unreal, the naming convention is going to be M underscore and then the name of the part that you've got or you're assigning to. So I might call this M underscore feather. Now M stands for material, and when we hook up our textures, the textures are going to have a T underscore texture name, and then the texture type is going to be an underscore after that. But for just setting up in Substance, I like to just go ahead and name them properly. And for the second one, I'm just going to name this M underscore Inkwell. I guess I should call this pen. Let's call it pen. Okay, so to start, so right now we have a Lambert 1 in our hypershade, and that's just the base shader that Maya comes with. That's just so whenever you open up any sort of file, it has a shader attached to it. If you don't have a shader attached to it, it's going to show in like bright green. So you can just assign the base shader to your model if it's showing up bright green. When I'm assigning textures, if I've got to assign multiple materials per model and it's just one mesh, I'll start out by assigning just one to everything. So if I click on this model and I right click on there and choose Assign Material to Selection, you can see it changes to a little shinier. So that means that the pen material has been added. Now, if I want to assign this material to the bottom here, to the Inkwell, I'm just going to double click on that mesh with base mode enabled, and I'm going to right click on that and hit Assign Material to Selection. Now, since they look exactly alike, you're not going to be able to tell that there's any change that's happened, but what we can do, whoops, don't want to do that. Let's do Reset Current Workspace. Bring the hypershade back, and let me minimize that a little. Yeah, so if you right click on any of these shaders, you can do Graph Network, and it's going to show your shader here and the hookups that it's going to have. Every shader is going to have different hookups, and you can attach files through here, but we'll talk about that a little more later. But just to test to see if the model has the two individual shaders on it, I can just click on color. Let's change this one to red. And there we go. You can see this part updates. And then if you, let's just do pink for that one. So it looks like we did successfully assign two shaders to one model. All right, so let me undo that. I don't need to have colors in this because we're going to hook up files to it later, and that would overwrite any color changes that we made. Okay, so now that those are assigned, I'm going to save. And again, everything that's dealing with the textures or the colors of the model, it's going to be done on the low poly. The unwrap is going to be on the low poly. The materials are going to be assigned to low poly. The high poly is there just for baking normal and potentially vertex color information. Okay, so now I can save one more time, and then I'm going to export. I'm going to export selection. So this is my low. And I have, it automatically goes to the scene section. Now, Substance is going to accept OBJs or FBX files. So I'm going to leave FBX turned on, and I'm going to name this pen and I'm going to keep the file name or the FBX file the same as the actual Maya file name, just because it's easier to deal with. Now, smoothing groups is something you probably want to turn on. If it's not, the rest of your options you don't really have to worry about. Just go ahead and hit Export Selection. And then for the high poly, let's go back into the outliner. We hide that low and then show the high. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go to File, and then Export Selection. Same thing. I'm just going to name this high. And then we can go ahead and bring these into Substance.